For years, the name Bishop Eddie Long carried both power and controversy. A man once revered as a spiritual giant, later surrounded by scandal, secrets, and silence. But now, after years of holding their peace, his family is finally breaking their silence. And what they're revealing changes everything we thought we knew. Hidden truths, emotional confessions, and shocking details are coming to light. And trust me, you won't believe what his family just admitted after all these years. For more than a decade, Bishop Eddie Long was one of the most influential and most controversial figures in the American church world. From leading a megachurch of over 25,000 members in Atlanta to rubbing shoulders with politicians and celebrities, Eddie Long's rise to fame was nothing short of extraordinary. But his downfall was even more dramatic: accusations, lawsuits, denials, and a community divided. His name became a storm of debate that shook the foundations of faith for thousands who once followed him faithfully. Then in 2017, the world learned of his death, a moment that left many questions unanswered and many wounds unhealed. For years, his family, his wife, children, and closest relatives stayed silent. They refused to speak publicly about what really happened behind closed doors, what life was like during the height of the controversy, and how they truly felt about the man the world either praised as a prophet or condemned as a fraud. Until now. Recently, new details have surfaced. Family members who once remained out of the spotlight are speaking up, revealing private memories, emotional struggles, and the truth about how they lived through the chaos. And for many, these revelations are bringing both closure and shock. In today's video, we're diving deep into this emotional and complicated story. The story of Bishop Eddie Long, the scandal that tore through his legacy, and how his family is finally confronting the truth years later. We'll uncover what really happened behind the scenes, how his loved ones coped with public humiliation, and why their voices matter now more than ever. Because this isn't just about a fallen preacher. It's about family, forgiveness, and faith in the face of betrayal. Stay with me until the end, because the things Eddie Long's family just revealed will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about one of the most talked about pastors in modern history. Before the headlines, before the scandals, and before the controversy that would later dominate his legacy, Bishop Eddie Long was a man on a mission, a young preacher from humble beginnings who dreamed of leading souls to salvation and uplifting his community. Born in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1953, Long didn't come from wealth or privilege. What he did have, though, was charisma, ambition, and a voice that could fill a room with conviction. After earning a degree in business administration from North Carolina Central University, Long briefly worked in corporate America. But deep down, he felt a different calling, one that would lead him far from boardrooms and closer to the pulpit. In the early 1980s, he made that leap of faith and began preaching in small churches, slowly building a reputation as a powerful orator who could move crowds with both his words and his presence. His big break came when he became pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia in 1987. At the time, it was a modest congregation of about 300 members. But under Long's leadership, that small church would soon become one of the largest and most influential megachurches in the country. By the mid-1990s, New Birth had exploded into a spiritual empire, boasting tens of thousands of members, a sprawling campus, and influence that reached across the nation. Long's preaching style was magnetic. He blended traditional gospel with motivational speaking, teaching prosperity and purpose, a message that appealed to thousands of African Americans seeking hope, financial success, and spiritual empowerment. He called it kingdom building, and it became his signature. He was not just a preacher. He was a leader, a businessman, and to many, a father figure. In the early 2000s, Bishop Eddie Long had become a household name in Christian circles. He hosted conferences that attracted global attention, met with political leaders including presidents, and even played a role in high-profile social movements. His church became a center of influence, shaping how faith, leadership, and economics intertwined in the modern Black church experience. To his followers, Bishop Long was untouchable, a man anointed by God. His sermons inspired, his presence commanded respect, and his image symbolized what many saw as the new face of Christian leadership. He was known for his sharp suits, his confident stride, and his bold declarations about destiny and divine power. But even as his ministry soared, cracks began to form beneath the surface. Some critics accused him of living too lavishly, pointing to his expensive cars, designer clothes, and million-dollar mansion as evidence that his message of prosperity might have blurred the line between spiritual growth and personal wealth. Still, his congregation remained fiercely loyal, defending him as a man blessed by God for his faithfulness. Behind the pulpit, Bishop Long was preaching hope. But outside those church walls, a different narrative was quietly beginning to unfold, one that would soon threaten to undo everything he had built. Because in just a few short years, the man once celebrated as one of America's most respected pastors would face allegations so shocking they would rock the foundation of his ministry, divide his congregation, and stain his legacy forever. And when the story broke, it didn't just change his life. It changed the entire landscape of the modern church. But here's the part they don't want you to forget. Before the scandal, before the judgment, there were people who loved him. People who saw him not as a symbol, but as a husband, a father, and a human being. And those are the voices we rarely hear. By the late 2000s, Bishop Eddie Long stood at the peak of his success. His ministry had grown into a multi-million-dollar empire, drawing worshipers from across the globe. To many, he represented victory, prosperity, and divine favor. But behind the grandeur and celebration, something dark was brewing. Whispers that would soon erupt into one of the most shocking scandals the modern church had ever seen. In September 2010, the headlines hit like a thunderclap. 4 young men filed lawsuits against Bishop Eddie Long, accusing him of sexual coercion and abuse of power. The accusations claimed that Long had used his influence, wealth, and authority to manipulate the men, all of whom were members of his congregation, into inappropriate sexual relationships. The news spread instantly. Overnight, the world that once praised Bishop Long was now questioning everything about him. New Birth Missionary Baptist Church became the epicenter of a media storm. Reporters camped outside the gates. Cameras followed every car that entered. And for many who had idolized Long, the accusations felt like a betrayal of both faith and trust. The lawsuits painted a disturbing picture. The young men claimed that Long had groomed them through mentorship programs, luxury gifts, and lavish trips. They alleged that he would take them on private getaways to places like the Caribbean or New Zealand, where what began as spiritual guidance crossed lines that should never have been crossed. They described receiving cars, jewelry, and financial support, which they said came with unspoken expectations. Bishop Long, however, denied all allegations. Standing before his congregation, dressed in a gray suit and gripping his Bible tightly, he declared, "I am not a perfect man, but this thing I am not guilty of." The crowd roared in support. Thousands stood to their feet, applauding, crying, and chanting his name. To them, their bishop was under attack, not by truth, but by the enemy. But not everyone believed him. The accusations had created deep divisions within the church. Some members left, unable to reconcile their faith with the allegations. Others remained fiercely loyal, seeing the situation as a spiritual test. Long's empire, once built on unity and prosperity, was now fractured by doubt, scandal, and anger. As the story unfolded, more questions surfaced about how the church operated behind closed doors. Reports revealed that Bishop Long had an inner circle of young men he mentored closely, often referring to them as his spiritual sons. He was known for hosting private gatherings and retreats with them, all while maintaining a strong public stance on morality, purity, and family values. The hypocrisy, critics said, was glaring. Here was a man who had publicly preached against homosexuality, who had condemned same-sex marriage, now accused of engaging in sexual acts with young men under his mentorship. For many outside observers, it wasn't just about the alleged acts. It was about the betrayal of moral authority. The lawsuits were eventually settled out of court in 2012 with undisclosed amounts reportedly paid to the accusers. Bishop Long never admitted guilt, and the settlement ensured that neither side could speak publicly about the details. Still, the damage was done. His reputation, once untouchable, was now permanently scarred. Even within his own family, the impact was heavy. His wife, Vanessa Long, filed for divorce shortly after the scandal broke, stating that she could no longer endure the pain and turmoil that had engulfed their lives. Though she later withdrew the petition temporarily, the emotional distance between them was clear. Their marriage, once a symbol of unity and strength, had been shaken to its core. The scandal didn't just shake a church. It shook an entire generation of believers. It